Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and this is a tutorial on the toString method in Java. So all objects in Java have the object class as their ultimate parent. So if I create my own class here, it will have object secretly as its parent, as the class that it actually derives from. And we're going to look at inheritance very shortly in this series of tutorials. But for now, I want to show you some of the standard methods that the object class has, and that therefore every class in Java, every object also has. So if I create an object here, I'll call it obj, and I'll just say obj equals new object, like this. And then if I go obj dot and press Control Return in Eclipse to get the autocomplete suggestions, you can see that obj has a whole bunch of methods here, and notify all, and the various kinds of wait I actually go through in my series on multi-threading. That's quite advanced, so I won't cover that here. But in these beginners tutorials, I am going to cover hash code, and probably in the next tutorial the equals or dot equals method, and also in this tutorial I'm going to look at the toString method. So let's create a class here, and I'll just call it, it's going to be very simple, so I'll call it, well, why not call it frog, and I'm not going to give frog any methods just for the moment, but I'll say frog1 equals new frog, like this. And again, if I do frog1 dot and invoke the autocomplete, you can see it's going to have all these methods because it has inherited all these methods from the object class that is secretly the parent of the frog class. And in particular, it's got a toString method. And the toString method is really useful for helping to debug your applications. So let's see how it works. I'll start by giving frog a very simple toString method. So the header of toString looks like this. It's public string toString, lowercase o, lowercase t, capital S, and it takes no arguments. And of course it has to return a string, so I'm going to just, here I'll create a string, and in fact what I'll do is I'll just say return, and for the moment I'll just say return hello, like this. So I'm just returning a string here, and if I do sysout down here, so control space, and if I now do sysout on my frog one like this, and I run this as a Java application, it's going to actually output hello, because when you do system.out.println on an object, it tries to invoke the toString method to get a string representation of that object. And if you don't have any toString method defined for your object, let's just comment this out to take this away again, then you can still do system.out.println, and what happens is you get this. So you get the class name, and you get a @ sign, and you get something here that looks like a memory address, but it's actually called the hash code. It's like a kind of unique identifier for all your objects in Java. And we're going to look at the hash code in probably quite soon in a future tutorial. So I'll put this in again for now. And the real use of the toString method is, of course, you can create a string representation of your object that enables you to identify that object, which is really helpful for debugging. So let's say that a frog has a name. So let's say this is public string name. And let's give it an ID as well. So let's say, in fact I should make that private, and I'll give it a private int ID like this. And let's say that the frog constructor allows you to set those values, so int ID and string name. And in the constructor, I'll just do this.id equals ID and this.name equals name. Oh yeah, it's capital. That should be lowercase I actually. Your variables should begin with lowercase letters in Java, really. And what I can do here is I'm going to actually use, I could do this, I could say, let's say return ID plus and some punctuation plus name. And there's nothing too wrong with that. And if I do that and I do system.out on a frog object, I've just got to, yeah, I've got to give it obviously a value for the ID and name. So let's give it 7 for the ID and Bob for the name. And if I run this, actually, maybe Freddy for a frog, Freddy the frog. So if I run this, it's going to say 7 : Freddy. And of course, if I have multiple different objects, this will allow me to identify which one's which. So let's make this 5. I'll call this one Roger and just do sysout frog2. So I'm getting now some useful output down here. Now there's nothing wrong really with this, it's just that it's a little bit inefficient because you've got a string object here and you're creating, you've got a string object here as well, and you're this is getting wrapped in a integer and a non-primitive integer type class and then converted to a string, and then you're concatenating all those strings together and turning them into a new string. So there's a lot of string objects flying about, and a slightly more efficient way of doing it would be to use string builder. So I can say string builder SB equals new string builder, and then I can do sb.append ID dot append, let's have some punctuation, and dot append name, and then I can do return sb.toString. So this avoids the inefficiency of concatenating strings, because every time you put a plus between two strings, you're basically creating a new string. So as I mentioned in the last tutorial, concatenation of strings is pretty inefficient, which you might not care about in a simple program, but this is a better way to do it, because here we've just got one string builder object and you're using that to build up a single string from a bunch of different strings without creating any intermediate strings behind the scenes. And if I run that now, then I get the same results as before. And of course you can use all the stuff that I showed you in the last tutorial here, like if you want to return like a formatted string, you know, you could use, for example, well, this is one version of toString. Let's just quickly look at another possibility. So you could also do I think I hit the return, yeah, hit the insert key by mistake there. So you could also do, for example, if I comment that out, I could do return string.format, and I could format this as let's see, %. I'll give it a width of 4 characters for the ID, and that's an integer. And this should be in quotes. So this is a format string specifying how the string should look, and this is stuff we covered in the last tutorial. And again, I'll have a colon there and then %s to output the name. And now I just supply ID and name. So I'm just using the string.format method here to create a formatted string in the same style as kind of system.out.printf, print format. And again, we have the same results here. And I could, if I want, I could left align this with a negative sign. But you get the basic idea. And that's toString for you. Very, very useful for debugging. And in the next tutorial, we're going to look at the very important dot equals method that allows you to compare objects. And this is all kind of stuff that will come up on a course or a interview possibly, or exam. So apart from being extremely useful, it's also very useful for getting jobs or passing exams. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial, and this code will be, as always, on caverprogramming.com. And until next time, happy coding.